Are we in the right place?
I'm checking the other one because there were two different confusing things, so I will see.
Hello, hope everyone's doing okay today.
There we go. We're just sort of, I was wondering if maybe I clicked on the wrong link or so.
There were two different links, so
Yeah, I'm trying to organize that. I don't know if some of you may or may not know that Esther had a family situation and is no longer working for Vital Communities. So I have great support from Leona. So thank you for being here, Leona. And we're trying to organize what was in the process of being done and where we need to go moving forward. Some of you might remember that Esther was working on our new work groups and our Google groups to send out emails, our links and things like that. So I'm sure we'll figure it out, but I apologize if there's some hiccups along the way. I do hope you had a chance to get the agenda. And this time we had a passcode. So in the future, we'll try to set it up that you don't have to do a passcode as well to get in. And I'd like to, if we can, I'm so happy we have quite a few people here, do introductions and also a bit of an icebreaker as we do our introductions. So the icebreaker for today is a would you rather from a superhero power. Would you rather be able to fly or breathe underwater? And I see, David, you're having some troubleshooting with your speakers. That's fine. We'll hopefully be able to fix that. Since I'll start, I'm Joanne Roberts, and I'm the consultant working on this project to help facilitate the meetings, help be strategic about the goals that we're working on, and figuring out our timelines over the next year. I think that I would prefer to be able to, I know the term breathe isn't right, but I would love to be able to swim underwater for a really long time. So I think that's what I would choose for my superhero power. How about you, Sunny?
I'm Sunny McFeetris. I'm from the Dartmouth College Childcare Center, and I wear a couple of hats, both as the director of the Childcare Center, but also as the representative for Dartmouth College to see what we can do to be helpful with the early childhood, situation that's going on. And I would definitely rather fly because I just love to fly. I've jumped out of an airplane. And I just love being in the sky. I've been in helicopters and small planes and big planes and, gone, to the top of mountains and plains. And so I would definitely rather fly.
So cool. I don't like to fly, but I'd like to fly if you were next to me because you give me some, you'd be very calm about it. So that would be awesome. How about you, Amy?
I'm Amy Brooks, Executive Director of the Early Care and Education Association. And I don't know, I'll have to decide on that later because I can't swim very well. It's kind of like, oh, it'd be nice to swim, but I don't like the stuff that's in the water, like the slimy stuff. And there's like stuff that bites. So I don't know if I really want to do that. And I'm like, I'll choose flying. I'm looking like birds. Maybe I'll just walk.
Okay. Superpowers walking really far without having to stop. That sounds good. Hi, Sharon.
Hi there. Nice to see you all. I'm Sharon Harrington, a Senior Programs Manager for Let's Grow Kids for Southern Vermont. And I also am sort of a bridge to the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children, serving on their board. So workforce development, recruitment and retention are a big priority for Vermont AUIC. I think both would be really cool superpowers. My issue would be hard to choose because they both sound really fun. But I think I would choose fly because I wish I was traveling a lot more than I have been over the last several years. And I actually love bird watching, so I think it would be really fun for me. So that's what I would pick.
Terrific. Hi, Michael.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Bennett with the Couch Family Foundation, and flight definitely for sure. Because I don't like to fly when there's engines involved, but if I was flying under my own power, that'd be perfect.
Hi, Carrie. How are you?
Hi, doing well, thanks. I'm Carrie Belknap Morris, and I direct the Early Childhood Education Program at River Valley Community College. I would probably pick flying, and I don't like to fly. I avoid it if at all possible. But when you said that, the first thing that popped into my mind was when I was a kid, I used to love when Wonder Woman would get into her invisible jet. I thought that was so cool. So I thought, well, maybe I could get comfortable with flying.
Invisible jet does sound cool. Yeah, I like that idea. I'm going to do a chat with David to see if his speaker. Oh, David, hi. Terrific. So you were able to troubleshoot. Welcome.
Good shape, thank you. David Watts, Director of HR at Simon Pierce. And sound like broken record, but I'd love to have the power to fly. I enjoy flying, whether it's on an airplane or jumping out of an airplane, and I love the experience of being above things. So I would definitely choose that. And just as an asterisk, I have a standing meeting at 1 o'clock I need to go to. I'm sorry.
Thank you for letting me know. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, Leona, you're an important part of our team. Would you fly or would you be underwater?
I always thought it'd be cool to have like super strength and be able to lift cars and stuff.
All right. All right. That's a good one. All right. Thank you. So for the meeting today, I think that we would like to try to really determine our strategic goals for the next couple of months. And I wasn't sure where we were. If you could give us an update, Amy. I was hoping Kim Voda might be able to pop into this meeting. Could she come to the next one? And can you let us know what she's working on? I know it was another part of the inventory or the survey.
Sure. I can go ahead and just give you an update on the preliminary kind of assessment that she had. So this is part of what we did. I think it was in June. We did a survey open to all licensed providers, family-based and center-based, in the 4 counties, Upper Valley, and asked them some specific questions around. This time we asked about some of their costs, and we again kind of checked in on their enrollment and also their where they are in possible expansion. So what Kim did is she started by taking what she had and breaking them into 4 categories, is what she and based it on the interest on expansion interest. The 4 categories were not interested in expanding, and she did discuss a little bit about their collectively that this particular group, we had 25 respondents, I believe. The not interested in expanding group was 11 programs, collectively serving about 200 children, averaging about 82% capacity. So they do have capacity within those. Stated facility investment of $70,000, whether in various capacity, playground, heating, fencing, flooring, weatherization, for building improvements. Heating, fencing, flooring, weatherization, things like that are obviously can reduce costs in, as far as heating and cooling and things. And that collectively they carry a mortgage debt of 1.3 million. Debt payoff could generate an average of 15,000 annually in addition to net income to support operations like wages. Basically suggesting that in this area, reduction of debt load would increase net income and provide the capital for the facility improvements and capital regular dollars, real dollars to increase wages. There are family-based programs in that data, so privately owned. In that there's 9 for-profits and 2 nonprofits in that data. The second category was interested in expanding 12 programs. 10 of the programs indicated need physical improvements like a bathroom, classroom, increased septic capacity, etc. 5 of the programs are understaffed. Collectively, programs serve almost 300 children and average only a little over 70% capacity utilization. Stated facility investment of around 240,000, including bathrooms, flooring, classroom partitions, storage. 5 of those programs own their own sites, collectively carrying a mortgage of 400,000. She suggested investigation into expansion interest and costs to support is an ideal next step for that group. The next group category was might expand. Again, she breaks down their mortgage debt and other debt that they have. In this one, interestingly enough, 5 nonprofit center-based programs would consider expanding. 4 cannot do it in their current space. 3 own and 2 lease their space. Only 1 carries a mortgage. The 2 centers that lease might consider purchasing a space. So, she had suggested investigating their expansion interest and cost to support is an ideal next step. And my thought is, is this a place that kind of crosses over to the RFI for Sean's work? If they're looking at expansion and they can't afford the building they're in, would this be a natural progression for that program? That's what I was thinking. And then staff, category 4, too burdened by understaffing to consider expansion. So they would consider expansion, but they are just so far understaffed that it's not something they can consider at this time. That's 6 programs collectively serving 540 children, averaging only about 40% capacity there. 2 own, 3 lease. So addressing staffing shortages in these programs, it would be priority is her suggestion. These underlying concern prevents these centers from considering expansion opportunities. So, obviously the common thread here through all of this is staffing, a pipeline of staffing, new staff, bringing in new people, training new people and getting those people to stay. And then that would help with meeting the current need for utilization, and then also obviously in future expansion. So the ECEA, when we were talking about this, learning more about this, we were looking at, a more organic approach to supporting centers. So, if we can find a capacity of 32 within a center by helping them with staff, stabilizing them with staff, and then, paying down a mortgage or adding on a bathroom to get up to a more a higher level of functioning as far as their financial capacity, we thought that should be dug into more. So that's kind of what we're doing here, is we're trying to figure out what their needs are and what kind of expansion is possible from within the programs that we have through, we need to identify what's not being utilized plus what can be utilized. And these are programs that are already licensed. You don't need a new director. You don't need to add new programming. These are up and operating. And it actually costs more to start up a brand new program than it does to keep these ones at full capacity and expansion if possible. So that's where, Sunny, this is the first time you're hearing this because I just got this. But that's where she suggested that we start taking a deeper dive into. So what we would do is take her suggestions, her recommendations for the 4 pieces. Obviously, the workforce piece is a whole nother, issue impacting all the levels, but addressing that, plus if she took a deeper dive to really look at if they are and the might expand or interested in expanding, what does that look like? So honing in on those pieces, and then also addressing the needs of those that are in the not interested in expanding and on the too overburdened, too burdened by understaffing to consider expansion. So that's where she is headed next, we're going to discuss how to dig into that next level. I think it's a smart way to do it. I like the way that she presented this in that kind of format, because this is where we can decide or in a we can match funding to, because this is interested in expanding, sustaining, and then also people who are ready to expand, so we can kind of gauge where along the line they are.
That was really helpful, Amy. Thank you so much for summarizing it that way. And I think when we get into the goals for this group, it aligns very well with some targeted goals that we can put into place. I also did follow up with Vermont Works for Women, and I want to follow up with that. They said they would be able to find a person who's willing to do estimates. And the first step would be having a list of who is looking to do the expansion. So it looks like you'd be able to use that survey to provide that information. Making sure we push this out to however many providers we can in the Upper Valley. But who is looking to do it, what kind of expansion they're looking for, and then their follow-up questions that this group would need to be able to answer is, who is funding? So if they go and they spend 2 hours at a site, who's paying for them to do the 2 hours at the site and the hour estimate? And then also, would they be the contractor who's actually doing the work? Or is it at this point the estimate? And then the individual provider, professional could say, I want to now go out and ask 3 different contractors to do this work, and whoever I feel is the best qualified, the best fit, who can do it in my time schedule. I think that would probably be the better way for flexibility for professionals in the field. But one of the targeted goals that this group could have is in the Upper Valley, who is looking to potentially expand, what kind of projects are they looking for, getting them a cost. And I think that links, Amy, with a conversation that you had in one of the work groups in regard to funding coming down the pike. And if the providers already had kind of the business plan, and here's how I could expand, and here's what I'm looking for cost, they're more likely to get that funding that's coming in. And Sharon, I see, thank you, you added to the chat, Vermont Expanding Infant, Toddler, and Preschool Childcare Capacity Grant Program. Does that align with facilities, or what's the focus of that grant?
So these are the, it's also known as Make Way for Kids grants. This is funding that we are, a program we're administering for the Child Development Division. This is combination of state and federal funds. So it does not cover like building a building, like that depth of construction, but it does cover like remodeling, repurposing space. And so I think that there's One of the things that it does not, it is truly for expanding slots. So what I heard Amy mention was sometimes there are challenges, preventing expansion. So I think that thinking about how funding could be used for those areas that there's not funding currently available could be really impactful. It is really truly for increasing the number of slots. So it's, there's a lot of grant criteria, and we do a screening process that has been, over time, we've really learned which projects, are most likely to be successful. And we provide TA for a year while they're doing their expansion. So I think that if you're looking for potential models that you might want to, explore for some additional work in New Hampshire or areas that are not funded through this type of grant fund, I'm happy to share some of our experience related to that. So,
Yes,
or the
please.
facilities group, Brenda, I think, is a part of that group. She could, share exactly the same information. So.
Mhm. Great. I'm kind of seeing some ties with the conversations that we've had in the past and where we can go, which is exciting. Is Kim going to be able to put a summary together, or can she attend the next meeting to kind of clarify or give suggestions for vital communities support, expanding it?
I think she needs to go one more level before, I mean, if you want to just hear about this part, but it's going to take, we've got to develop a survey. We've got to identify some potentials and then dig deeper into their needs. I wonder, Aaron, if we just informally, I'm going to start a Google Doc of grants that I know are up and coming, and I'll include the employee retention tax credit. I'll include Vermont, the VITA that just came out, where childcare is one of those priority sectors. So if we can, and maybe you can put in the Let's Grow Kids piece, like, so we can just have eyes on the deadlines, eyes on what they do cover, what they don't cover. And then I think it'll be a lot easier to match this bathroom with that funding and move on it a lot quicker. And then we'll also know where, as ECEA and maybe even as other communities, we could offer that kind of one-on-one support, like attach a person to that project to make sure that they have the support that they need. I don't know where I mean, I feel like at this point, I would love to have some expertise in, to help just even in the conversations with Kim in, I don't know if it's just basic construction or like home renovation, or just so that somebody says, it's not always that easy, or it's actually, that can be done very reasonably, or, I don't know, just somebody can speak construction better, home renovation construction, not, or building renovations better than I can. I don't have much. Maybe the guy that works at Lowe's could like volunteer. I mean, he literally would be perfect, because you call and you're like, I want to build a wall, and they sketch it out for you, and they totally get what you're saying. That's what we need, is one of those people that we can describe to.
I think what we've learned is that, like, starting with like permitting, like that is the very first place to start. If they can't consider expanding if they can't access the proper permitting from related to wastewater. And so like I think that there are, like, those are the preliminary screening techniques, the questions that are part of the eligibility process to determine if someone's invited to apply for our grant. So like there are certain things that are about readiness, even before construction costs. So I think that it's, and one of the things that we have learned is that the individual program's investment in, finding out some of that information themselves also shows their readiness for success to follow through, because that's another piece. It's a little bit like the licensing process, where someone says, we used to provide technical assistance for programs that were starting up. And the licensing department was like, if people can't get through the licensing process, they're going to have a really hard time living into the regulations. So yes, you can support them, but you need to have them do some of this work themselves. So part of our work has really been about connecting them to the resources. Like, here's who you need to contact, at the Department of Natural Resource. Come back to me after you've had that conversation. So that's a piece of, like, we want to be supportive, but we also want to make sure that the investment is used wisely by programs that are going to be able to be successful with that. So let's just, I'm happy to share like offline some of those, things that, or it might be better for your facilities group, depending on who's really looking at this. But those are some of the things that I would just kind of caution you about. It's really, you're talking, it's very intensive and time consuming TA. So, we have a whole team across the state that are doing this. So I think that we can share our lessons learned, and, happy to do that for sure. And I wanted to also just highlight one thing is that this will be the last grant cycle that Let's Grow Kids is doing. And there will be I'm not sure what the title will be, but there will be a business center in Vermont for early childhood education programs that will be leading that work. So, this is, I'm happy to share our lessons learned even after we're done with this project, but that will be shifting. The Child Development Division will put out another RFP, and someone else will be applying for that. It will not be Let's Grow Kids. So we're going to be completing the project.
A business division?
So they're part of what came out of legislation last year is that there would be a business center. And so that will be announced soon as to what that will be. So that might provide some of the TA in Vermont about some of the specific things that you're talking about.
That's really helpful, Sharon. Thank you. I was writing down as fast as I could because there are a lot of great points there. I would say that this is the work group to talk about that because the facilities group is fairly small. And Sean, when we had one of our meetings, said because this is about recruitment and retention, because by adding a bathroom or by doing the remodel, we're keeping centers or providers in business, that having the conversation here would make the most sense. So that's why I left it as a goal under this group. And we do have that connection with Vermont Works for Women, but it's a matter of figuring out if they come to the site, who's paying for them to come to the site, because they would be looking at the permitting, the size, because it's very hard to just give a general sense of a bathroom is, $30,000 because each house is so different. And what I heard was that they don't really want to give too much of a basic estimate because they could be completely off based on where the person is located, if they're on septic or if they're on sewer, where they're going to locate the bathroom, if they're going to need a pump that goes up, and pumps it out if it's at a lower level of home. So there was a lot to it. And I think one of the conversations that we'll have is, I think this is a really important targeted goal. And then we can break out between the next couple of weeks who's going to look at the different sections of it, so that hopefully by December we could have some really clear language for people who are interested in this to follow the resources that you mentioned, because that's a lot of the Vital Communities work, is connecting the dots and providing the resources. And you just mentioned a whole bunch of resources that we'd want to have on the Vermont and the New Hampshire side, to then be able to have an easy stream when the money comes down the pipeline for people to have this as part of their business plan. Because when Amy and I met with Patty Moynihan from Mascoma Bank about getting loans to do this kind of work as well, she said the key is for the professionals to have a very strong business plan that includes the facilities aspects of it to be able to expand, and to be working with either a local bank or know how to go through the hoops for state or funding that might come down because people don't have enough time to do that work. And I'm meeting, and hopefully Amy will be able to meet steering committee October 7th. I'm going to have to cut 15 minutes short because Tracy Hutchins connected Allison and I with June from the Grafton Regional Development Committee. What is that called, Allison? And got the Grafton part right.
It's Anne Duncan Cooley, Anne,
Oh,
not
well,
June.
I was thinking
Yeah,
June,
that's all right.
sorry.
That's all right.
I
And
had the
it's
Anne.
right. It's it's the Grafton Regional Development Corporation. So it's the RDC that serves Grafton County, which is mostly the Upper Valley. There are some, the New Hampshire side of the Upper Valley, there are some communities that are vital communities served that are in Sullivan County that are not served by GRDC, but they're a capital access point, as well as a business advising point. And so, and Amy, I think you had already had some preliminary conversation with Anne, and then we're re-rehearsing some of this. The COAS Economic Development Corporation, which is their sister agency or their sister organization in COAS, is working with the provider network in COAS County. So it's GRDC's hope that they can work with the provider network in the Upper Valley as well. Obviously, this is why Sharon's news about the business center coming in Vermont, this is where we can start to patch together resources that serve both sides of the river, although they're going to have a slightly different flavor to them. But hopefully what we can do is come up with the list of business services that are needed, right? And then find the matching organizations. And if there are gaps, figure out what the gaps are. I think there's a train the trainers model that's embedded in some of that too, because the business concerns are specific because it's a highly regulated industry. There are some specific business concerns that require a little bit more training than some of the business advisors have.
Yeah, and I think we're making progress because back in almost a year ago, November, there were just conversations about, are there even resources out there? So now we're making the networking, the connections to be able to say, yes, there are resources. Here's how we can pull our energy together. Here's a location that we can put it for providers to find, and really heading in a specific direction. I see, Amy, you asked Sharon if she knows by chance if each town has individual different permitting or if it's standard in Vermont.
So I mean, obviously you need to look into your local zoning permitting and your own, like there's wastewater permitting. I mean, it depends if it's municipal. One of the things that we find is that there's a lot of rural communities that are not on municipal water and sewer, and that is where you need to go through the Agency of Natural Resources. I'll get you some information and I'll get it to you, Amy.
Great.
I didn't know if they just had their act together, because New Hampshire, you got one town, you have to pay to be in front of the zoning board. I found out, and then the next town, like in my town, we have no zoning. There's no zoning, no planning board, no nothing. So it can be night and day from one town to the next. And I didn't know if Vermont had like a standard for.
It's the
I
same
think
in Vermont.
Vermont is not uniform either.
God love New England and the sovereignty of the community, right? I'm sorry to be late to this, but it sounds like the first place we were talking about is this capital improvements that allows for expanded capacity of existing providers. Is that correct? Because there is
I gave a general assessment of Kim Vada's first impressions of looking at the data from the survey, that needs survey. And she put into 4 categories of expansion and also with lowering costs in there. And it was like no interest, some, interested, ready, and then staffing was the issue of not are interested, but can't because of the staffing issue. And then the recommendation she gave. So looking at it from the 4 categories, she needs more time to dig a little deeper, but at the same time, I was wondering what from this angle can we be prepping for to kind of meet her. As we were talking about, funding is starting to hopefully be organized to get ready to go out the door. Vermont has some funding that's ready now. So, what are the next steps? And then Sharon was saying, before we start talk construction, we really need to get a handle on permitting and things like that, because a lot of the renovations had to do with like bathrooms.
You're right.
Adding, in order to add capacity, you have to add bathrooms. So that's a given. So just kind of as a starting point is what questions to ask.
So I was just wondering about, have the other topics related to business services and business advising come up yet? Or are we still just talking about the capital improvements and how you would fund those and that side of things?
So Kim Vada always has that business advising embedded in her lens when she does any work. And what her intention of this is two things, is to reduce costs, to find real funds that can be reinvested into wages. The other piece is, and that whether that be, Allison, weatherization or, or whatever, that lowering their mortgage. The other piece that she looks at is getting them to a certain, closer to a 40 capacity and at least 80 to 85% utilization of their space. And then she's found that more centers are sustainable at that level. So that, the 20 children in a church basement that has no overhead is possible, but, a private center at 30 is not as sustainable as a private center at closer to 40.
Right. So what she's basically doing is looking at maximizing revenues, reducing costs, and in order to maximize revenues, they're going to be optimal enrollment levels for each facility. And so the question is then if there is some sort of capital improvement that's necessary to optimize that enrollment number, right?
I think this all came around with the fact that ARPA money's coming through, and
Yeah.
there are a lot more allowable uses of that money than ever before, and we need to be ready to use that money. And
Right.
this is part of the readiness.
Okay, so, but I'm thinking about so on the reduced cost piece, the business advising side of that and the maximizing revenue side of that, those are capital improvements may be a part of it, but they are separate business services to be provided, right?
They are, and you're on the track of shared services, and we would love to get to that point. Our biggest piece right now is really staffing to build capacity so that directors can work on that. We've been working on that in Coos County forever for business capacity, and we're just getting to that point. And so it takes a little bit of time. So even in our network, we're not quite there. We're still in the trust building. We're still in, recovery and trying to keep centers from closing. And that, directors being also business leaders, it's not, and they don't have enough room on their plate for that yet. I feel like we can embed that in some of this work that we do with them, that we can help, if we have a business consultant working with them on accessing and using funds to get to a certain capacity, they can also be working on their business practices. When COVID hit, Kim Vada was able to go into and support 17 Upper Valley centers. Thank you to a very fast-moving, quick grant from the Couch Family Foundation, and started that trust building, and is continuously working with them to identify those exact needs you want to know. She's still trying to figure that out, because it changes from needing thermometers as a priority to needing toilet paper to needing as a priority. And like, where are we now? We just need staff, because they can't even make their rent without having enough staff. So that's, as far as like utilizing a power buy of supplies, that's not really where they are yet. But through this relationship building and this other work, I think when we come out the other side, we'll be aligned a lot better to be able to build that kind of a system, hopefully.
Michael, did you want to add anything in?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. given the conversation around needing estimates and permitting and all that, or understanding the true cost of these capital improvements, because it seems like the data that Kim provided had some estimated costs in there. I mean, you mentioned for category 3 that of those 5 nonprofit centers that fall into that, you know, likely to expand or willing to expand, that their facilities expansion cost estimates were about $250,000. So where is that number coming from if there hasn't been an actual job estimate?
So
Is that
some of them have
self-reported?
I know of a few centers that actually had thought about this during when they got some of their COVID money, or they're expecting to get some of their COVID money, and started
Yeah.
to look at expansion, like, you know, around COVID. So offering an extra bathroom for their after school kids was one I can think of. So they wouldn't have to cross sections and with the preschool kids to use the bathrooms. And so they had started to break out some of that money. Of course, those estimates are much, much bigger now, just due to the cost of everything. But I think some people have been thinking about this. I know of a nonprofit that had gotten a quote a couple of years ago, it was pre-COVID, on a new septic. So they could get up to the capacity of the building. The building's capacity and the septic capacity weren't the same.
Or
They could
mismatch.
add quite a few kids if
Yeah.
they upgraded the septic. So they were getting some funds because that was a capital that's harder to get. That money's harder to get. And here we are at this place where we could actually use funds for those things. We're gonna have to update a lot of those estimates.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. So they're kind of placeholders for now, but we
Right,
need
yeah,
more,
and
we need more
It's
investigation.
definitely
And that-
not the total cost of
Yeah.
what she's estimating.
And I'll just say, I mean, you know, the Couch Family Foundation has been providing direct grants to providers for about 6 years now, and we do a lot of capital improvement grants as well. And we're in the final quarter of the year, so we have an application deadline of October 30th for any last funding requests for the year. If there are any nonprofit centers who have a project teed up that could be funded and lead to, you know, expansion and capacity, please, please, please have them reach out to me or apply for funding, because there's money ready to go right now.
That's excellent.
think-
And I think that's what we're trying to get to, Allison, from the beginning of the conversation was, we know that from the survey, there are organizations that want to expand. The next step is having an expert telling them exactly how much that's going to cost. And so in order to even apply for the Couch Foundation, they're going to have some specifics as to what they've done so far through the permitting process, how much it's going to cost. Contracting costs are up 60%. So if you got something that's 2 years ago, you have to at least double it if you can find the contractor to do the work. So that's where we were with that conversation. I think that's fantastic. It's exciting. I got goosebumps. So I'm like, oh my gosh, we can actually help some of these folks that, you know, Amy, you're working with, that you've been like, oh, you got to keep moving on this. And also, Sharon, thank you for continuing to add website information. And Leona, I think you're already doing it, but if you haven't, copying that information right into the minutes so that it's easy to find when we go back and look through them would be fantastic. At this point, one of the things that this work group needs to come to agreement on today are the goals, at least in a framework of what to focus on over the next couple of months. So the other groups have kind of honed in on where they're heading to, and I want to make sure that this group is equally alongside those other groups. And so I'm going to share screen, and hopefully this is the right agenda. Yes. Thumbs up if you can see the agenda to make sure. Okay. So the conversations that we've had have been interweaved, which is great, but they also have been repetitive at times. And so I have worked with multiple committees, including the steering committee, to fine tune the overall statement. So this is this steering committee's North Star of this is what the initiative is about. And we made some changes to the language in regard to making sure that the role of this initiative is to facilitate. We tweaked the language to be talking about, I didn't fix it here, I apologize, childhood education. And that's up here too. And we took out the word and, which I think I took out. You can let me know if I missed it, Amy. And so whenever we're having a conversation in our work groups, if we're asking, is this something that the work group should take on? This will help us have that umbrella to say the steering committee has put this forward as these are the causes that we're going to champion. These are the things we're going to put our voices behind, kind of staying out of the politics, but keeping things moving. And in June 2022, this is the statement the staff and retention and recruitment work group came up with: identify and catalyze short and long-term strategies to increase retention and recruitment of child care center professionals. That is what the steering committee took a look at. As far as this group, is that the same language you would use moving forward for this next 6 months to a year as the focus of this group? Does it still reflect what you want to do?
I think it needs,
Allison?
I was just gonna, I think it needs to be a lot more refined. I think it's much too general to really give us traction, because what I've observed about this group is that we get started down one path and then it inevitably surfaces a different need. And so we kind of move over to trying to address that need. And then that, you know, leads to something else. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that we aren't kind of staying focused. And as you just named at the beginning of like why Sean thought facilities, like everything impacts retention and recruitment of staff at this point. So I think we have to pick what strategies, you know, we've identified, and now maybe what you need to do is say some of those and then say we're going to try to catalyze these, I guess, is maybe the thing that I would
So, yeah, I
say.
appreciate that, but that's what we did. And perhaps you weren't at a meeting, but I took the big ideas from the symposium that were
Mhm.
created before this.
Mhm.
And we talked about facilities expansion, and specifically in regard to the centers that are and home providers that are known. And so Sean can help with permits. Sean cannot help with Amy's list of who she knows needs the expansions or not. So it comes back to this group of connecting with who might need that expansion and providing the resources for them to be able to do facilities expansion versus looking at facilities and models. So that's why that specific one, we had a conversation that went on for a few minutes and it came back to this group, just to let you know why it ended up back here.
I understand, but I guess what I'm not so concerned that it came back to us. What I'm concerned about is the idea of if we leave this as our focus, we haven't really identified priority focuses because it's still at too high. I don't think it's still at too, it's at 50,000. So for example, to me, if we wanted to identify a goal for the next 6 months, it could be focus on feeding the pipeline and identifying, you know, fast track training strategies. That could be one, or it could be focus on providing business services to allow for higher wages and expansion could be one. That's what I'm saying about getting more granular. It's not so much about why things come back to this group so much as just like getting us at more of a granular level to really activate and catalyze some of those strategies, I guess.
And so, yes, and based on that, that's what the meeting for today is about, because we spent a lot of time talking at one of our last meetings about professional development. And that actually ended up through the inventory not being something of great need at this time. We talked a bit about mental health and how that is really important. But the way to lift mental health is be able to have sustainability for these professionals that are on the cusp of not being able to continue on with something that's not only that it's their profession, but you know, it's their vocation as well. So that's exactly, Allison, what I was hoping to narrow down and get language for today.
So I just sort of somehow missed a little beat. So I will shut up and listen for a few more
No.
minutes and then drop back in.
No, exactly where I need everyone's help is where you were just the springboard. So I appreciate you being that springboard to go to say, okay, let's throw the pasta against the wall. What targeted action steps is this group going to work on? And I started to put some down below, and maybe that will help us with the overall steps above, the overall vision above. We have talked about the Upper Valley region having a wellness conference in January, and I'm not quite sure if that's anything people want to do. I thought what we switched to was the National Week of the Young Child and proposed schedule, which was April 1st through 7th. Is that accurate, that this group wanted to focus on not something in January because it's just too short, but to try to connect it with April?
Yes.
Okay. So that's something we can add up above.
Can I just ask, is that a Vital Communities effort, or is that, Amy's network effort? I think that's another place where we tend to sort of lose traction, is which are the things that are actually part of the network in comparison to Vital Communities. So like, is that really something that should be the full Vital Communities focus, or is that really something about the existing members? Just
So
throwing it out there for conversation.
So our hope has been that the providers aren't required to celebrate themselves, that it becomes a community effort. So yes, we were hoping that the ECEA can take on some of that, but we were hoping that Vital Communities would join us to bring the community into that event and not just be an event within the provider world. We want it to be a community-based event, truly. So yes, we would like that event to be a Vital Communities partnered event as much as possible. Good clarification, Sharon. Yes, so that's it. That's a definite yes. And thinking about that, Sharon, the lift of the other thing as far as the Kim Vada work, that's a big lift for Vital Communities. What the ECEA needs is almost, right now it's Team Amy. And I would love to have, whether it's somebody from another work group that has some expertise in this, or somebody that, can help guide this work, have a smaller team that can move that work along, so we don't have to bring it up at meetings like this. I just think it's too big of a bite. The ECEA has taken it on. We would like to start matching, I'm going to start an inventory of funding that has an allowable use for these types of things, for lowering costs and for increasing expansion. I'm going to move ahead, but it would be nice to have a few partners and a smaller group to work on that piece. So that I would pull out of Vital Communities, but I would like to tap some of the resources Vital Communities, all of these people bring. Sharon, you've done your part. I'm not asking, but you've been very informative. So I'm going to put you in my Google Doc so that we can keep connected as far as allowable uses for funds that are coming.
What I'm teasing out is themes, though, for this work group, which is the recruitment and retention, is the work group focus should be to, this reflects the steering committee, to lower costs, to increase retention, to build capacity. Those are all efforts that this group should be focusing on. By lowering costs, that's how it links to facilities in some examples that were brought up today. By increasing retention, you could increase staff wages if you're able to decrease your mortgage, if you're able to decrease or bring in more students. So that's a way of building capacity. And then the National Week of the Young Child, I think is supporting professionals in the field. Is that the main
So,
idea of that?
I think what I don't know, Allison, I could put words in your mouth, but I think what Allison is looking for, and I don't know if the rest of you are looking for, is like to us for just say, like, our work group focus is to promote an annual this annual activity week of the young child to bring, help me, my brain is going to Sunny, week of the young child to bring, early
Awareness
childhood
to?
into
Fairness, yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. It's a community effort to raise the visibility of the young child across the board, but including, recognizing our staff. But that's our focus. Is that what you mean, Allison? Is you want to state what the activity is in our focus? Or keep it high level and then list what we're doing?
I think it could be a both. And I guess what I'm trying to get is I think that Joanne is getting us there, and I think you are too, which is I think that what impact are our activities supposed to have, right? And then what activities can we do so I think it can be maybe at 30,000 feet instead of at 50,000 feet, and that then we could get down to 2 or 3 activities that we are going to do to support that. But I think one of the interesting questions going back here is that, okay, Joanne, what you heard around the primary issue around retention is supporting and providing supporting wellness initiatives and caring for the mental health. And Amy has been talking about that, and the directors have named that as a need, right? Is the retention, but also the other piece of retention is higher wages. And so one of the things that we're talking about here is a strategy that would allow more money to go to wages, right? I mean, that's the idea, right? It's not really lowering the costs because it would still be operational costs for the center, but it's shifting the resources from the capital and direct expenses to the payroll, right? That's what we're talking about. It still might cost you $100,000 to run your center a year, but instead of spending, 65,000 of that on staff, you're now able to spend 85,000 of that on your staff, right? And so I think that if we are talking about so I was thinking about sort of, I'll put this in the chat to maybe make it easier.
I'm going to stop share. Put this in the chat underneath it so we're not looking at too many documents at once. And some ideas that are in the chat are use the inventory to guide marketing, and then establish a network of businesses advising and business services to support redirection of resources to wages and promote the recruitment and retention of staff. So adding into this level, get this part.
So that's a kind of, that's at one level an activity, but it's not a specific activity. Like there could be a whole set of specific activities around that, so that the network of business advising and business services is being handled through the Center for Business, the Business Services Center or whatever in Vermont. Like I don't know all of the things that would come under that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you could say, I mean, this is what's interesting to me is the celebration feels to me like it is more directly an advocacy effort than if it's a raise awareness effort, but maybe it's not. Maybe it is better in our work group. I'm not adverse to it. I just think that let us draw direct lines to how does this really help with the recruitment and retention of staff? Like, how do we see these connectors coming back? And if we don't see these connectors coming back, do we lift them up to another work group and say, we really feel like this is something necessary, but it's not for this work group to do, and we sort it out? So like, for me, back to the recruitment stuff is, are we going to support the recruitment? Are we going to try to build the pipeline, or are we going to try to fast track training, or, you know, like is that part of the recruitment that we're going to take on? And building the pipeline, it requires a lot of different efforts, but that to me is strictly within the recruitment and retention work group, and it's not in anybody else's work group.
So let me try to
Yep.
frame it a bit for the language before we then break it down, because I'd like to get the big ideas first. Then we can do exactly what you're saying, Allison, which is, so under these things, what are we going to do in October? What are we going to do in November? What do we want to ask might belong into another group? So, and I think, was that Michael? Were you going to add to that as well?
Well, yeah, I was just, because I hear what Allison's saying, and particularly like the connection of this potential community convening in April to the advocacy group. At the advocacy meeting on Friday, we talked about a community convening in April. I'm assuming we're talking about the same thing here and not two different things.
Right.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I just want to put Allison's language in here so it doesn't get lost, and then we can. Yeah.
And I think, and this is just listening to everybody talk, I think the other, maybe what Allison too is saying is, rather than saying we are going to identify and catalyze short and long-term strategies, Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's just saying, let's just land on the strategies and push them forward. Like, what are the actual strategies we're going to address?
Right. I would love to sort of catalyze the following strategies to increase recruitment and retention.
Right.
Strategy 1,
Right.
establish a network of business resources. Strategy 2, build the pipeline. Strategy 3, support the mental well-being of the existing workforce or something. I don't know. I'm just listening to you guys and kind of putting it, but yes, Michael, you have read my mind. You have done a Vulcan mind meld with me. Thank you. I appreciate that. It makes me feel less crazy.
All right, good.
So under the work group, we'll do the following. Under identify network of business advising and services, is that itself a strategy, or do you want to put underneath those more specifics? You mentioned building a pipeline. Does that fall underneath this, or is that in itself a separate strategy? And I'll just put it in so it doesn't get lost.
So I guess I should ask here is, does this group have the capacity to build the pipeline? Or is this group looking to get behind an effort of pipeline building? For example, the ECEA's evolving workforce building strategy. Or we choose one thing from the inventory to promote. Or does this group think that does this group want to build the pipeline? I guess is what I'm asking. Is this, Sunny?
Another question that I have around the pipeline is actually for Carrie. What do you see as students coming in? Because that's part of building the pipeline is, do we need to back up steps and also work on building that pipeline of students coming into the field, or do you see that that's pretty steady?
That's a really great question. And actually, we had a discussion about enrollment overall in the state for not only community colleges, but other four-year state programs. And we definitely were impacted by COVID, and most of us saw, a decrease in enrollment, which really wasn't a big surprise. Now I think most of us are seeing, we're back up pre-COVID, we're holding steady. Some of us are seeing a bit of a growth, but there are still a couple of programs in the area that in our state that are still seeing that decline. I think for River Valley, we're seeing a pretty good mix of folks who are already employed in the field, wanting to ensure that I'm meeting certain qualifications or I'm preparing myself for promotion and growth within the profession. And then individuals who are either coming out of high school and know I want to do early childhood, or career changers. I think what I've seen is that apprenticeship in Vermont has been a really exciting, just endeavor. And I really think, boy, New Hampshire, we have a good opportunity there. And also our partnerships with high schools. I think there's even more that we could do. I'm so excited that I haven't had any early childhood running start courses, for example, in probably like 5 years. And this year I have 3. So I'm like, yay, all right, we're getting out there and, talking more to those high school students and getting them interested in the profession. I hope that helps a little bit.
Sure, can I ask a follow-up question? Do you do you have like career information days for middle school and high school students that you participate in? Because that is an area that we have been working closely to highlight careers in early childhood education in parts of the state. And that might be, if we decide, I mean, I don't want to derail this conversation because I know Joanne's trying to talk about strategies. And now we're once again talking about actual implementation specific things. So, but because you're here, I'm just so curious.
Right, sure. We do have some events that are specifically targeting high school students, but some of our programs have been doing these summer or school vacation boot camps for younger groups. And that is definitely something where we feel like, we still need time to really, measure and see how successful they are. But we feel like that's an important area for us to continue to work in, because so often, a student might take a running start course and say, oh, I'm so interested in early childhood, or, oh, I'd love to do, cybersecurity, where it may be. But my family has already decided that I'm going to go to this college and I'm going to study XYZ. And it's a little late for them to kind of plead their case to make a change. Whereas when they're in middle school, it just seems like they're working together to define that plan.
I'm just listening.
So Amy, I don't think we answered your original question.
Okay, no, so I guess, there's, I was just going to put in the chat, but there's like 3 or 4 generalized on-ramps in recruitment. So we're not talking about people that are already hired. We're talking about recruitment is recruitment before the hire. So you have, like Harry was saying, we don't need to, but there needs to be a revitalization of the high school programs, which starting to see some light in various areas, actually, not just early childhood. High school route, you have the typical college route. Coming out of high school, 2-year, 4-year, they're probably going to end up in public school if they go to a 4-year program and they plan on that. Unfortunately, we lose a lot of our associate's degree teachers, the same thing. And then you have the people that are true career changers that want to go back to school, that know they want to do this. And then you have everybody in between. So you have the people who are at home, don't really know what they want to do. You have the people working at Kohl's that would like to try it, really don't want to go to college right now. So I guess if I were to explain what our strategy is specifically on recruiting, regardless of where they end up, if they go into a 4-year program, a 2-year program, an apprenticeship, anything, just come talk to us about the field. And then we are providing an option with built-in flexibility as a pre-hire strategy, support them in all of the barriers that seem to are tripping people up. So if they get hung up on the criminal background check because they can't get to the, they can't navigate the paperwork, or they lack the soft skills to get to work on time or whatever. So that's the piece where our strategy is a pre-hire strategy. It is not a post-hire. Once it gets to post-hire, then, there's another thing this group could take on and not bother with that. You could do the supporting staff and exploring the career path, if that's something this group wants to do. But I would say that, colleges have their recruiting, they have their, you have your strategies for recruiting, you have workforce development people who go out and do that. You have visibility, and there's funding. So if people want to come in and enter that, but I guess the piece is like people who don't want to go to college route, or people who are not going and making that call to the 800 number, how can we capture them? So a lot of our people we're capturing through Facebook. We're capturing through the Upper Valley Facebook pages and listservs, and our website. We're getting hits on our website inquiring about employment. So we're almost like just fielding that pre-hire employment piece that I would love for them to go to employment security about, but they're not going to. So that's the piece that we're doing. I think that looking at the different on-ramps that are like the college route, high school, middle school, getting people interested, there's lots of directions that this group could go, just landing on one.
I started typing in the comments, Joanne, because I thought it was maybe helpful to be inside the document rather than in the chat. I think one of the interesting things is, again, and I think that Sharon was sort of lifting this up, and what I liked about the language that you used was partner with, and I think, Amy, you're asking a good question. No, I think if you look at what the steering committee is saying, Vital Communities' job is, it's to facilitate and to support, and not to necessarily undertake activities that we own and drive, right? Maybe this community-wide celebration is one of the few activities that we would take on owning and driving because it's aligned to Vital Communities' convening role and that kind of thing. So it aligns better. But no, are we going to be better? Is this small little work group going to be better at designing these programs than organizations like yours, like the community colleges, like the colleges, like Northern Lights, like Childcare, where at developing these programs? No, we are not. All we're going to do is create more confusion and add to the load. So it feels like to me that maybe if we sort of said catalyze and facilitate some very specific strategies, right? And I think and I had sort of then started putting in, okay, strategy 1 is about building the pipeline. And I like Joanne's language about partnering with the organizations that are working on building the pipeline. And maybe this is where, like, having Carrie in this conversation, representing the community colleges, maybe being intentional about who's inside this work group. Like, it's great, Joanne, that you're inside this work group. And if you could shift back into your superintendent hat for a minute, like sort of the stuff that's going on inside the high schools and the pre-apprenticeship programs and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I think the inventory was helpful. And Amy, you've got, as you say, you've got some pre-recruiting efforts, or I don't think of them as pre-recruiting. I think of them as recruiting them and pushing them into the pipeline in a different you're a different kind of recruiting mechanism that you're talking about. And I think that's really important. And so how could we be facilitating and partnering with those things? And maybe that's and you're sort of saying, well, why don't you pick one of these strategies that you think is good and how could we, but maybe that's the good thing is for us to then, even if we identify the organizations to partner with, we could go back to the organizations and ask them themselves, what could Vital Communities be doing, right? So
if I had to pick one, I would ask for the high school piece. I think that is something that the Upper Valley could really use to revitalize that, organize that, understand it. It could feed all of our programs and ideas. And I know that who was I talking to not long ago? A guidance counselor of some sort said that the percentage of her high school kids that were not employed upon graduation or had no employment plans was like 30%. No, they weren't going to college and they were not currently employed. That's a lot of people. So if even there were a couple of people that were interested in this, so like, Sharon was talking about the 8th graders. There's all this research talks about 8th grade that kind of start looking at where they're going to go, what they're going to focus on. If we can rebuild those high school programs, Sunny can tell you, like those programs with some practicum, real life experience, solve the soft skills issues and big surprise of their first day at work. I think that if I had to choose, I would raise my hand for that one.
okay, so I think that's helpful. And I think having your perspective on that is helpful. It would be great. I wish that there was someone from Community College of Vermont sitting in the conversation, just the way Carrie's sitting in the conversation, and hear, what they would say would be helpful. Maybe they would say exactly that, like regress, like the best thing you guys could do would be even middle grades, forget high school. I want you to do middle grade because that's the one that nobody is taking care of right now. That's the sort of missing link.
And so building from that, the reason I shared the steering committee's umbrella was to have you notice the shift in change and the highlighting in yellow of facilitation. And now we're bringing this into this group, right? You have your main theme that we talked about today, which is leaning toward connections, facilitations, partnering, not owning it, as you mentioned, Allison, but being the network to the resources that we know that are out there. And so, in building the pipeline, we today aren't going to resolve if it's middle school or high school, what it's going to look like. But a strategy over the next year is to build the pipeline, including colleges, public schools, private schools, apprenticeships, and then that becomes what we work on. That's targeted, but it goes back to Allison's thought of like, what are the 3 main strategies that we really want to work on? So we began to, I think, identify the overall focus of this group, the facilitation group, the business end of it. I like, Allison, what you put together for that section. And now we began to, I was typing in as you were typing in, Allison, and then I popped back onto the Zoom. What are the, you might call them strategies, I call them, targeted action steps, whatever it is, we have to narrow those down. And then each of you might take a certain strand of it, and between the 2 weeks, work on that strand and come back and say, well, here's where we are with expansion of facilities. Here's the resources that we found. Because just in my notes today, and Allison, if you could add these in, we talked about creating a Google Doc of New Hampshire and Vermont grants, which is something that Amy and Sharon talked about, which I think would be great to facilitate and support early childhood professionals. And we also talked about starting a Vermont and New Hampshire facilities expansion resources section. And where Vital Communities fits in is being that portal of where that stuff might live for now. For Upper Valley, whether you're Vermont or New Hampshire, you can come to the website and find that information once we sort it all out, because there's a lot of unknowns with that, I think, right now. And the annual celebration, this group might hear about it, but then, as Amy we also need to pick by the next meeting, whoever would like to be a co-chair with Amy. So she's just not alone in doing this work. So if you're interested, please contact Amy and I now that you kind of have a sense of the focus of where we're heading. And what I would like to do for, I understand people are busy and monthly meetings would be great. This is a group that hasn't defined those strategies yet. And I think if we don't meet in 2 weeks and define the strategies, the month of October is going to fly by, and then we'll be in November and we're still not quite sure what this group is focusing on to narrow it down, because the conversations about recruitment and retention are massive. There's so many different ways that you can go. It makes sense that you've had such in-depth and important conversations so far. Just trying to, part of my role is to make sure that each group has targeted goals. And it seems like, while I'm seeing it, that this was a really great meeting of narrowing it down and being like, well, what does that mean? And what does that look like? And what do those words mean? I'm hoping that we could meet in 2 weeks before, because also if we go too long, we're going to forget what we talked about. And then we're going to repeat the conversations a little bit. I think our next meeting is scheduled. It's on the agenda for, I didn't put it on this one. Does anybody know when it is?
October 10th.
The 10th? Oh, it's Monday, the 10th, yeah. Would it be okay to, thank you, October 10th, schedule that meeting, but kick it off with where we left off, with defining the strategies or targeted, defining the aspects of it, maybe being a little bit more clear about what we want to do. And that way I can take it to the steering committee so that they can support the work of this and have a better understanding of where everybody's heading. Does that make sense? And then if you want, however you want to move forward with this group and update each other and make sure that we have accountability for the strategies that we put forward is great. And I'm willing to attend twice a month, whenever you want to do it. I just want to make sure you're a very important group for sure. And I don't want it to get lost at all. Oh, October 10th is a holiday. Okay. Oh, is that? Okay. What would be the next time that would work for this group? Mondays work best. I know it's hard, but. So would it be October 17th? I have to flip calendars and the chat isn't scrolling down for me for some reason. I'm gonna hop onto my other calendar so I can see. All right, that's the 10th.
Well, you're looking at dates, just for you guys that aren't necessarily looking at the Google Doc that I was typing into. What I was hearing people say was that there were kind of these 3 strands. One was focused on recruitment, and that was really the building the pipeline side of things. One was focused on retention, and that's really the mental health and wellness piece, which is what we didn't get to, right? And then one was this idea of that would support recruitment and retention, about being able to redirect more to wages. And so that's a business operations side of things whose impact is ultimately on wages, right? And to me, that starts to be, now we've got threads that are a little bit more clear cut. And then if we're talking about facilitation, and Joanne, I'm just trying to, I know you're trying to wrap this, but I just was kind of distilling this in my own head. If we're talking about, now we're talking, so if we have the idea that our job is to catalyze and facilitate these 3 long-term strategies, or these 3 strategies, one strategy, then we talk about, okay, we're talking about building a network or identifying the resources in those 3 areas. That feels very manageable to me. And like, as you say, Joanne, could then send us off into smaller little work groups with everybody kind of focused on one
Mhm.
doc, right?
So it doesn't get too overwhelming. Like one, defining what does this group see as the key things that are the top of your list. If you had to like snap your fingers and say, if we could do one thing, what would it be? The
Yeah, and I
legislation
also-
and the politics we don't know about for November. So we're kind of Vermont, New Hampshire, we're all anxiously waiting to see who's going to be in those seats. And the idea is to be ready and prepared to not walk through the door, but run through the door when there's an opportunity to do so. So yes, I think that's what we're hearing. Can we meet on October 17th? It would have to be from 11 to 12:30 because the facilities meeting for Vital Communities for this initiative starts at 1, and I'll be coordinating, facilitating that one, like a 1-2.
Well, in the past, when we had a Monday holiday, we just sometimes kicked it to Tuesday. Is that a problem for people? Like, if we wanted to look at, oh, the 11th is a Tuesday. The 10th, so if we just kick to the 11th from the 10th, would that work?
Yes,
for
but some people wrote that they had the 11th, they couldn't come. Right,
I thought that they couldn't come on the 10th because it was a holiday.
Okay.
Is that right? Am I?
no, you're
confused?
right. So the 11th.
I could only come for part of it.
Okay, so then maybe the 17th is better. I could do either one, so.
I'm flexible.
I
Would
can
people
do the
prefer me-
17th, but I need to, I all but a half an hour of it. I'm not available on the 10th or the 11th. Sorry.
So are you saying you're available, Sharon, at the 11 to 12:30 hour on the
The 17th.
And that would be from 11 to 12:30 because
I-
1 o'clock is facilities.
Okay, yes, yeah, I'm 11:30 to 12. I have a commitment, but I mean,
Do
I
we
can weigh
want
in
to
at
try to
another
make it
time.
an hour meeting on the 17th with the goal of creating our big umbrella, our strategies, our sub work groups? And then we leave with that hour and then we come back that 2 weeks later on the normal 2 weeks time and go, how did we do with our small groups? Any questions? How are we doing? Resources, support, and go from there. And we can make that meeting on the 17th from 11:30 to 12:30. Does that work for you, Sharon?
I thought she said she had an 11:30 to 12.
I do.
Oh, my hours are off. Okay.
But don't, you do not need to frame this around me. I mean, I can add something
if
to a
we-
Google Doc. I can
What
do
if,
whatever.
what if we backed up to a 10 to 11:30? The reason I am so important, I think it's so important for you to be in this conversation, Sharon, is you've got the bead on Vermont in a way that I don't think anybody else in the conversation does. I could be wrong about that, Lori. I hope I don't know, Lori, where your beat is. So if I am being disrespectful to your expertise, I apologize in advance.
On the 17th, I could do 10:30 to 11:30, if that works for others.
I'm a yes. How about you, Amy? Sunny, you said yes. Carrie said yes. How about you, Michael? Had to leave. Lori? Why don't we try it? So October 17th, 10:30 to 11:30. Leona, could you please set up a Zoom for all of us? And Lori said she can hop on 10:30, which would be fantastic. Michael said he's available in the chat. Why don't Allison and I go back and forth a little bit about what we drafted today? Kind of clean it up between the two of us. So there's like some concrete language to go, hey, here's what we came up with, our concrete language. Send that in the agenda advance, share it with Amy. If there's someone who would be willing to co-chair with Amy, please let Amy and I know. That would be fantastic. And I really appreciate everyone's thoughts, efforts. This is the hard part, like getting it down on paper. But once it's there, everyone's grounded. I know we're just going to fly. So I appreciate everyone's patience and input and circling back, but it's getting us closer. So I appreciate it. I know, Amy, you and I are going to catch up, so we'll stay on Zoom. I hope everyone has a great week. Take care. See
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye, everyone.